Making a bud vase arrangement is one of the easiest and most fun arrangements that we make here in our shop. Today, in this video, I'm going to show you my tips and tricks on how to make the perfect bud vase arrangement. My name's Ellen Frost. I've been a florist for 17 years. I'm working to build a community of flower nerds online. Today, I'm going to show you how I make a bud vase here in my shop, either for my home or for weddings and events. Bud vases come in all different shapes and sizes. So when you're making a bud vase arrangement, the first thing you want to do is choose the bud vase that best works for where you're going to put it and what kind of flowers you have. So I always like a mix of sizes, especially if I'm doing like a table-scape. I like to choose a vase that fits well with the flowers that I have. So if I have taller flowers, I might choose something taller. If I have something short flowers, I might use something shorter. Bud vases come in all different materials. So here I have just a sampling of the bud vases that we use a lot here in the shop. This is colored glass. You can get colored glass in any color. This is like an amber, but you can get green, pink, blue. This is milk glass, and this is actually a hobnail milk glass, which is my favorite kind of milk glass. It's super fun, and I always like to use this with bright colored flowers because I feel like the bright colored flowers really show off against that white finish. You can use something metallic, especially if you're trying to have sort of an upgraded look for your bud vases. This is gold, but you could use silver or mercury glass or copper. I love little ceramic bud vases. This is a special one that was gifted to me. You can use the color to really complement the flowers that you're using. And then probably the most common is just a clear glass bud vase. So depending on, again, the size of your flowers, you might choose something bigger or smaller. So I like to think about choosing an opening that is about 3/4 of an inch wide to about 1.5 inches wide. If you get bigger than that, the arrangement really becomes less about a small, petite bud vase type arrangement and becomes something a little more substantial, and you're going to need a lot more flowers to fill that vase. So something in about the 3/4 inch to 1.5 inch size opening is about where you want to be. To begin designing your bud vase, you first want to fill it up with water. If you're using just one bud vase, just making one design, using something with a small opening like a watering can might work fine. And I like to fill my water up about halfway. Because these openings are so small, it's really time consuming to fill each of these with a watering can if you're doing dozens, or in our case, sometimes hundreds of bud vases at once. So a little trick I like to use is to set up all of your bud vases and fill up a bucket of water, and then you can just dip those in and fill them up very quickly. This is probably the most time-effective way to fill up a large number of bud vases in a short period of time. When making a bud vase, the trick to making the perfect bud vase, in my opinion, is to make sure that you have all of the elements that make any arrangement awesome, even though the bud vase is very small. So it's kind of like taking all of the perfect elements and making one perfect arrangement in a tiny vase. So the first thing I'm going to start with is foliage. I love to start all of my arrangements with foliage, whether they're large or small. I want to make sure I clean off any leaves that are going to be inside the vase. And so today I'm using Solomon seal, so I want to make sure I clean off all of those bottom leaves. And when I'm thinking about the height of my bud vase, I want it to be no more than 1.5 times the height of the vase. So this is maybe a little, that's about where I want it to be. So after I have my foliage, the next thing I'm going to put in is a line flower. And a line flower is a flower that grows up the stem rather than a face flower. And today I'm going to use stock. This is really fragrant and it's already cleaned. So I'm going to add one of those. Next, I'm going to use a focal flower. So today my focal flower is going to be a tulip. So this is going to be a double tulip. It's going to be really big when it opens, so I'm going to just use one of those as my focal flower. Next, I'm going to use a little bit of filler. So filler can be any small flowers, anything that works well in the background. I think today I'm going to use for my filler some ranunculus. I know ranunculus could also be a focal flower, but it's so pretty right now that I don't want to not use it. So I'm going to use this as my filler flower. It's a little bit smaller than my focal flower. And then I always like to add like a little unique element, or what I call like a little bits and piece. And today I'm going to use this is some spirea that's fully blooming. It's really pretty. It has great sort of a cascading shape. So I'm going to cut off some few little branches of these, again making sure that my stems are nice and clean. And I'm going to just tuck this right here at the bottom of my arrangement. And I might use more than one piece depending on how full I want my arrangement to look. Easy peasy, very simple. Depending on how wide your opening is of your bud vase, you might want to use 2 foliages or 3 fillers or more than 1 line flower. It just really depends on what the size of your vase is. But as long as you have each of these elements, you are setting yourself up for a perfect bud vase arrangement. Bud vases are great to use by themselves as a single arrangement. If you want to have it in your house, like on your kitchen table or on your desk, those are perfect places for like a little tiny arrangement. Oftentimes though, we use bud vases as part of a table-scape. So either on a dining room table for a house party or for a wedding or a rehearsal dinner. And by table-scape, I mean we have lots of bud vases running down the center of a long rectangular table. When we're making bud vases for those situations, I try to not think of the bud vase as an individual arrangement, but rather each bud vase together as an arrangement. So I want to make sure that each vase plays well together. I want to vary the heights of the vases and the arrangements, and I want to choose vases that as they run down the table show lots of interest and depth on the table. I don't want every single arrangement to be short and the same height. I want to have these differences in textures, in heights, in widths, so that I can use all my same elements in each of these, but in different sizes and different shapes. So when you're making a table-scape, try to think of all of your vases as one piece so that they all work well together. Also, when designing your table-scape, I always like to think about whether or not the people sitting at the table are able to see over your arrangements. Now, bud vases are a little bit different than, like a large single centerpiece that is really going to take up a lot of room on the table and could more easily obstruct somebody's view. However, if you have very tall bud vases, something in like a wine bottle, I've seen people who design in a wine bottle, and the arrangement can get actually pretty tall. That is going to hinder people seeing over it and talking to each other across the table. So I like to think that the arrangements should be, if you want somebody to see over it, no more than about 12 inches tall. That's sort of my max height for seeing over on a table-scape. And of course, it's also going to depend on how close your arrangements are on the table. When figuring out how many vases to put on a table-scape, I usually think about 1 bud vase per 1 to 2 feet. So I would not do any less than that because the table is going to feel pretty sparse. These are not large arrangements, so the table is going to feel pretty sparse. You could absolutely do more. You could do 2 or 3 per foot or foot and a half, or even 2 feet. But I feel like a good rule of thumb is 1 arrangement per about 1 to 2 feet. So if 2 people were sitting across the table from each other, each pair of 2 people would have a bud vase in front of them. That I think is a good rule of thumb for figuring out how many vases you need on a stretch of a table for a table-scape. If you are designing bud vases to go on a round table as opposed to a long, skinny, rectangular table, you are going to be probably clustering the bud vases together. If you had just a standard 60-inch round banquet size table, I would say at least 3 bud vases clustered together in the center is about what you want. You could do 5, but if you did 5, I would make sure that at least 2 of them are small, kind of on the smaller side, so it doesn't feel too cluttered. I think 3 is a good size, though, is a good number for a 60-inch round. And you're just going to cluster them right in the middle, have some varying heights, and make sure that any focal flower is facing towards the people sitting at the table. So you don't want your focal flower facing in so that no one can see it. You really want to make sure that that is facing out to the people sitting at the table. Bud vases are a cost-effective arrangement, especially for weddings and events, also for your home, because you can have just a few elements and keep the cost down, but still get a lot of bang for your buck. So this is an arrangement that has about 5 stems in it, plus the bud vase. At my shop, we charge about $27 to $35 for a bud vase of this type. It depends on if the client is going to keep the vase, then we go up to the higher end of about $35. If they're renting them and giving them back to us, or if they have provided the vases themselves, then we're in about the $27 to $30 range. So now that you know my tips and tricks to making a perfect bud vase arrangement, I hope you'll try it at home with just a vase that you have in the house, or you can use a bottle. You can get these at thrift stores. You probably have one around your house. Try making a bud vase for yourself. Keep it on your desk or on your kitchen table and enjoy it all week long.